I'm waiting for... Okay, we are... Greetings, chess players! We are back live, and this time I am joined by my good friend, FIDE Master James Eade. And those of you who are fans of the show or have been in chess camp before know that James is, my favorite guest, personal favorite. Um, and so we have him on as often as possible. And I picked a surprise game for him. And um, before I get into the game, let me remind you, James Eade, FIDE Master James Eade, yeah, he's a FIDE Master. He's also the author of the best-selling chess book ever, Chess for Dummies, and a chess book that I've been enjoying for a little while. I'm perusing through it slowly, and he also organized this chess tournament. Um, but there's a wealth of games in that book, and the players. Wow, the stories behind the players. I think it's just you, Eade. I don't think I'm glitching, I hope. Um, if everybody can hear me good, let me know.
I can hear. Talking about San Francisco.
Yep, that's the one. Um, and he's been on boards with the FIDE and U.S. Chess Federation. Owned a great chess publishing company, organized all these great tournaments, and currently runs the Eade Foundation, which I'm going to put up a bunch of fresh links to so everybody can see about this. But the Eade Foundation, am I glitching?
I'm not sure if it's just me because this is the first time I've used these headphones, but you are.
The audio sounds fine to me.
So the audio sounds fine to Jim.
Because when I move my headphone jack, it
okay.
sounds better. So I think it's
All right.
just my headphone
All
jack.
right. I hope so.
User.
Yep. The Eade Foundation does all these great things, both locally, nationally, and very important projects internationally, building chess communities where they wouldn't exist. And I want to encourage everybody to check out the Eade Foundation and support it. Go see what it's doing, and you'll want to support it as well. So I've got a surprise for Jim. And first, let me tell you a little bit about the game. One of my secret little chess obsessions lately has been looking through the games of a Mr. Fred Dewhurst Yates. Fred Yates, when he was at his best, was as good as the best. The best meaning Alekhine, or how some people say Alekhine. Lasker, he beat Lasker as well, and Capablanca. So, I mean, if you can beat those three guys, you're really good at chess. And in fact, he was the British champion many, many times. I don't know the exact number. I want to say maybe 5 or 6 times. Champion of his country at that time, even in Empire. He didn't start chess until he was relatively late. I mean, he didn't start doing it seriously until he was 25 or so. And unfortunately, his life was cut a little bit short. Because back in the time periods we're talking, the early, 1900s, they didn't have the alarms that we have now, smoke alarms, and carbon monoxide alarms, all these things you see up on the ceiling that are important to check your batteries. He did not have, and sadly there was a gas leak. And so he died about my age after a brief career in chess. But boy, did he leave a mark. He wrote. I have one of his books in my library, and he wrote beautifully about chess. Um, and it looks like I am glitching for quite a few people. Usually, if I'm running too much on my system, we start running into little problems. Can you guys hear me all right? Or shall I try to, before we get into the game, I mean, I can always use a photo of Jim and talk to him on...
Let me see something real quick. Maybe it would help if we just make sure
Yeah.
there's no unnecessary things open. Sometimes there are just things
Yes.
that don't close all the way in the background.
Yeah, I'm not so sure if I'm not worried if my camera freezes occasionally. Mostly, I want the audio clean for you guys, so you can hear Jim. Talking about the game, though, so I've enjoyed looking at Fred Yates's wins. However, he would also lose to players that were, not the greatest chess players ever. And here's one of those games. So it's going to be a Fred Dewhurst lost. And let me give you the date of this game. This was played in the British Championship in Scarborough. So it's a Scarborough Fair, Jim. 1909.
I remember the Scarborough.
I figured you would. 1909, and he's playing Mr. Holmes. Not Sherlock, but Harry. Which is kind of funny because there's another game that I like to show which has a Potter. It's not Harry Potter, though. But this time it is Harry Holmes. All right, so let's take a look at the game. Jim's got a chessboard. I've got a chessboard, and I'm going to show you some stuff. All right, so Harry Holmes starts with d4. And Fred Dewhurst Yates. Good, I'm not glitching anymore. Megan, you fixed it. Thank you. She just closed a whole bunch of stuff. d5. So d4, d5, opening with center pawns. Then we've got c4, a queen's gambit, and e6. Maybe we'll go one or two more moves. You let me know when you want to talk about...
Yes, the Queen's Gambit declined. The
Yep.
accepted was not considered... back in 1909, the accepted was not considered as sound as declining it. So, but, perfectly valid defense. And you'll notice that the drawback of there's a drawback that's immediately obvious. When you play e6, you limit the scope of the bishop on c8. So the light squared bishop for black has no scope, and a piece's power is directly associated with its mobility. And because it's now immobile, it's less powerful. So you can see the bishop on c1 for white. It's got a long diagonal to move to. You can choose to play the d2, e3, f4, g5. So you can see right now there's a difference in the piece's powers based on the pawn structure that's been established after only 2 moves.
White continues with knight c3. And black plays knight to f6. And now, Jim had mentioned, and I see some people guessing moves. That's wonderful. Yeah, knight f3 is a 100% playable move. But Jim had talked about the difference in the scope of the bishop. White's bishop goes out to g5. getting an early pin on f6.
And notice that the other fight that's going on here is for the e4 square. White would love to play e4, but the pawn on d5 discouraged it, so the knight goes to c3 to support it again. The knight goes to f6 to deny it, and the bishop goes to g5 to pin the knight to the queen, making e4 another possibility, or at least a possibility that White would have without suffering material loss.
Then, so, black does not like that pin. Mr. Yates does not like that pin, and he plays bishop e7.
Again, e4 is now ruled out.
And then we've got e3, because e4 is ruled out, so he just plays pawn to e3. And this move is a little bit interesting. Knight b to d7 is what Fred Yates chooses.
Well, it's interesting in that, but you want to play the c pawn, pawn on c7 to c5, just as White has played his pawn from c2 to c4. So the knight's normal square would be c6, but that would interfere with the mobility of the c7 pawn. So moving it to d7 has a couple of things. One, it reinforces the pawn move c7, c5, and it also defends the knight on f6. So if bishop takes knight at any point, knight takes knight would keep a knight on f6, which black wants to do because it guards the e4 square and the d5 square. So black really would like to keep a knight on f6. So this is a fairly subtle move, but it's got two very strategic points behind it.
And then Harry Holmes chooses queen to c2.
Okay. Now queen to c2 is a fine move, but it's a little premature for my liking. It's not clear to me that the queen belongs on c2. It might very well. But the knight probably belongs on f3, and I would prefer to move that prior to moving the queen to c2. It's very committal. It's probably a good square, but it's just a minor criticism.
And let's see. Yates plays...
Reinforce e4 again, so there is a point
that's
to it.
true. I hadn't saw that aspect of it. That's interesting. Black plays a6.
a6. Okay. Now, I want people to think about why you would play a6. And I'm thinking about it now. And I have some ideas. Does anyone want to suggest why would you play a6? Are you worried about the knight coming into b5? I don't think so.
What's going on with a6? Anybody want to take a guess? Why Fred Yates, a very strong chess player, by the way. Fred Yates, again, he defeated Alexander Alyakin. He defeated Capablanca, and he defeated Lasker in tournament play. You cannot do that unless you're really, really good. So why would such a strong player play such a slow pawn move in the opening? There must be a reason. Anybody have a guess? While I'm waiting for you to type in your reason, it is let's see. Prepare long a diagonal bishop. So Master Elvin thinks black wants to play b5 and get the bishop on b7.
Right. Now you can't play b5 right now. It would be subject to capture. If you think about d5 takes c4, bishop takes c4, then you could play b5. It would be hitting the bishop with tempi. And you would then be able to play bishop to b7 on the long diagonal. So that's an excellent point.
Very good, Master Elvin. Very good. So a slow move, but has a big point. Chess is a conversation. You guys hear me say it a lot. And sometimes your opponent is yelling something to you with their moves, and sometimes they're whispering something. And a6 is whispering something. But Master Elvin heard what was being said.
Yeah, I personally don't think it's the best move, but that's the point behind it. So we want to understand why players played certain moves, even if we would play something else.
It's fun to try and get in their minds. White plays knight f3, and black castles. So we've hit. Black has a pawn in center, and they're castled, but they haven't answered the question that Jim brought up about their c8 bishop. We don't know what's going to happen with how that's going to get in. Maybe that dx c4 b5 is coming up. Let's see what happens here. Ooh, this is a very interesting choice. Rook d1. White plays 8, rook d1. So two unusual moves from white. Queen c2 and rook to d1.
Well, these moves are maybe not the best, but the point he's trying to make here is the queen, he thinks, as white, that the c2 is the optimal square for the queen. It attacks the e4 square, which is trying to get a pawn to move to e4 so you can play e5 if nothing happens. And he thinks that the queen belongs on the c file. Now he's saying to us and to his opponent, the rook on a1, it belongs on d1. And that's where it's going to be at best suited. Now you could make the argument that it might be best suited on c1. And we don't know that for sure. So it's a little, both the queen c2 idea and rook d1, just a little premature in my mind. They're tipping your hand. You're saying you're committing yourself when I don't think it was necessary yet to commit yourself. So I would have continued with a bishop move and a castling, and then I might have played the other rook to d1 so I can play the a rook to c1. These are minor criticisms because there is a point to putting the rook on d1. Obviously, if you're going to play e4, the d4 pawn would need some support.
And black plays rook f to e8.
Okay. Black's expecting the e file to open. If c takes d5 and e takes d5, the e file would be half open, and the rook on e8, which now looks like it has no scope, would then have more scope. So it's a preparatory move, anticipating that the bishop is going to move away from e5, and there's going to be a pawn exchange in the center of some kind. And they want the rooks to be in the center files. So it makes sense. It's just not clear how the game is going to proceed from here. It's time for white to make a decision about what to do with the bishop on f1.
And that decision is made. It goes to d3.
Okay. Now, if I was going to play the bishop to d3, I would have done it before moving the rook to d1. And so that is, again, minor criticism. But sometimes a single tempo can mean winning or losing a game, so that each one is precious. And so I think if I had to play it over, my rook would still be on a1, and I would be castled now. But what happens?
It's a nice battery aimed at h7. The queen and bishop are nicely coordinated. However, this is one of those situations where black has a way of costing white an extra move, and indeed, Fred Yates sees that and capitalizes on it. Dx c4.
Okay, now's the time. The bishop has already moved to d3, and black's going to say, okay, now you're going to move again.
And it does. Bishop takes c4.
Okay. And now, were we correct in thinking that b5 is going to be played?
We were not. And maybe, maybe b5 is a really good move. But Fred Yates, I think, is going for a little bit of to punish his opponent for some of these early committing moves. And when you want to punish your opponent, you play you play very boldly, and he plays c5.
Wow. Interesting. Because I think the rook to d1 was designed to discourage that c5
Yeah.
move. And to me, it is a little bit discouraging. So I'm surprised that he played that. But if it's tactically sound, then it solves a lot of
Yeah,
problems.
it's worth noting that Holmes's rook is in the d file with Yates's queen, and so opening that file seems a little counterintuitive to Yates's plans, but we'll see how things go.
It just makes my spider sense tingle. Doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just a bold move.
DX c5.
Yeah, that's normal. You open that file, got your rook on it, you want it open.
And then queen to c7.
Okay, this is the tactical solution that I was wondering about. No other move seemed logical to me. And so queen c7 is very bold. But if this is playable, then black's solving all of his problems. And so I'm interested to see how white
Holmes
respond.
castles.
Okay, now the key move I would think would be b4, trying to hold on to that pawn. And what he's probably saying is that, okay, if he plays b4, I'm going to play b6. Because you can't play pawn takes pawn or c5 takes b6, because I would play queen takes bishop. Queen on c7 taking on the bishop on c4. So this is a tactical solution. You're not really sacrificing a pawn. Even, just temporarily you are. Because now white's saying, hey, I can't hang on to that, so I'm just going to castle. Get my king to safety, get it out of the center.
Get one bubble water, please. Thank you.
Good decision.
And Yates kind of surprises me here again. Plays b6.
Okay. He's relying on the pin on that c5 pawn. Pawn cannot take without losing the bishop on c4. So it's a tactical resource. It opens up the line for the bishop with the bad bishop on c8. Will become a happy bishop on b7.
Then Harry Holmes responds with move 13, bishop f4.
Okay, he's putting the question to the queen. He says, do you want to move someplace? Or do you want to play e5? What do you want to do? And it's a good question to ask the queen, because the bishop wasn't really threatening to capture on f6, because the knight on d7 would simply replace it. And you want to keep the two bishops, wants to keep an active open position. He's got the rook on the only open file, and the c file might become open soon. So, which is again why I would have preferred to have one rook on the c1 and the other rook on d1, which is awkward to do now, but that was a smooth choice in the opening. So what does, obviously you can't allow him to take your queen. What are you going to do?
Queen takes c5.
Restored material equality. Now both players have captured two pawns. And how to assess this game now? The queen is attacking the bishop on c4, so white must respond to that. White has gotten the ability to move the bishop on c8 to b7. The queen is on c5. Is that exposed? Is that a good square for the queen? Now, if the rook was on c1, I would say no, that's probably too exposed. But with the rook on d1, I'm not sure it's not a good square for the queen. So, interesting. I think black has solved all of his developmental problems. But white, you can see, white's got no real weaknesses. There's nothing really wrong with white's position. And his development is complete. Just not ideal. I'd rather take the rook on f1 and move it to c1, then I would be happier. But still, looks fine to me. And I don't see any reason for white to lose this position.
Well,
So
white
what
plays, Holmes plays 14 knight to e4.
Oh, this may be where he starts to go wrong. I don't like that move. Okay.
Well, it moves the knight toward his opponent's king. And knights are good close-range attackers, and it's doing it while attacking black's queen.
Correct.
So that's the reason behind it.
And
Yeah.
I did think that the queen on c5 was exposed, and this is a way to say, hey, you shouldn't have been on c5. That's too exposed. I can attack you.
Yeah. It's
And there's
interesting.
a tactical reason for this as well, because you can't play knight takes knight, queen takes knight, knight to f6. And can anyone tell me why?
Knight takes knight, queen takes knight, knight f6.
Hitting the queen, which is ideally what you would want to do.
Because you would lose something important.
Something is unprotected on a8.
Yep. So the normal sequence, black has not unified their rooks yet. And so
Right.
it's
Perfect.
the normal sequence exposes that problem. So Yates retreats to queen c6.
Okay. Now notice also that the move knight e4 not only attacks the queen, but it also attacks the square d6. So this may come up soon. So queen to c6 is a good retreat. The other alternative was to move it somewhere along the fifth rank, and that could have been another alternative way to play.
Yeah, someplace like maybe h4.
Yeah, queen h4 seems like a reasonable place, but then
G3
knight g3 might.
Yeah, it's not sustainable there.
It's a little bit of a hassle, right? So yeah, so c6 might be the right square.
It's one of those important choices in chess that I like to talk with my students about a lot. You guys know this. When your queen's under attack, number one, you want to respond, not react. You want to find a place that's safe. You want to find a place that's active. And you want to find a place that's sustainable, meaning not bugged again. And queen c6 seems to meet that criteria. And Jim talked about this possibility a moment ago. Here is knight d6.
Okay. Now, there's a couple of things that I will say about this move, knight d6. One is you want an outpost in your opponent's territory. The knight is the ideal occupier of an outpost. And normally, the best outposts are supported by a pawn. In this case, it's supported by the bishop on f4 and the rook on d1. So it's an outpost supported by pieces. And that can be if you can sustain it, that can be a real thorn in your opponent's side. Because now the knight is cramping the movement of and remember, a piece's power is tied to its own mobility. It's tying down where those pieces can move. It's attacking the rook on e8. So the rook on e8 has only two choices. So it's not very mobile. and it's attacking the bishop on c8, and we want it to move into b7, where it's still subject to capture. So, the knight on d6 is kind of a little bone in the throat. You got, I don't like that. But if I take it off, bishop takes knight on d6, and rook takes d6, hits the queen again, and allows me to double my rooks on the open file. So there's a strategic drawback to taking it, but you kind of want to take it. So this is kind of a question you have to ask yourself. This is where players go into deep thought often. Do I want to continue to play on with a little bit of a cramped position with a knight on d6, or do I want to take it off and suffer the consequences of that?
I would probably do the same thing Yates did here. I do not like that knight on d6 if I am black. It is terribly uncomfortable to me. Very dangerous. And my bishop on e7 is not very useful to me right now. So I would go ahead and do exactly what Yates did, and that is make the choice, take the knight.
Okay, now you're surrendering the two bishops. So this is an important thing to point out. And I assume he plays rook takes? Okay. Now, if you evaluate this position, it's a little bit different from the previous positions. Because still, the pawn structure is equal, even. There's no real weaknesses to attack. But you can see it's an open position. And open positions favor the bishops more than they favor the knights. And this is true from the middle game to the ending. So now the bishops can rake the board on both sides, and the knights have trouble covering both sides. So I would say there's a slight endgame advantage based on having the two bishops. That is in White's possession. And so I'm curious to see how he proceeds now.
Well, again, he needs to move his queen, and again, you don't want to freak out. You want to take your time, find a safe spot, find an active spot, and find a spot hopefully where you aren't going to be bugged immediately after going there. Queen c5 is what Yates does.
Okay, so he's revisiting the c5 square, which is a good square if you can maintain it without being harassed.
And you had mentioned this possibility, Jim, with the rook going to d6 with tempo, with initiative. You said then they could stack their rooks. Rook f to d1.
Okay, so now I'm looking at this without knowing the result and not knowing anything about the players. I'm just evaluating the position. I've got the two rooks doubled. The rooks for black are not connected. And I got the two bishops. So I'm a what me worry guy right now. And I'm thinking I've got, if not a clear advantage, I certainly am not concerned. I'm not offering a draw. Let's put it.
And let's see. Fred Yates plays knight to d5. This is move 17. Knight f6 to d5.
Now, this is a tactical solution to black's problems, and if it's a solution at all. And see what it's relying on is two things that are going on here. One is pinned to the queen on c2, so it cannot take the knight. And the other thing is that the knight is disconnecting the rooks that were just connected. So that the queen on c5 is threatening to take the rook on d6 if the bishop is eliminated. And the knight is threatening, knight takes bishop. So then the rooks would be connected, so that's not really a threat. But for example, the bishop can't go to g5 or queen takes d6. So now we have pieces doing guard duty. That's why we said in the beginning, the outpost is obviously better suited if there's a pawn supporting it, because pawns don't mind doing guard duty, but pieces don't like it as much. So the bishop is okay guarding the rook on d6, but we'd rather not be tied down by that responsibility. So I'm assuming after knight did d5, there's two things that occur to me. One is to play bishop to g3, which I think would be the normal response. And the other is to look at, not do, rook takes knight.
And indeed, Holmes looked at it, which is a credit to him. Um, again, I don't know much about Harry Holmes. I came across this because of just looking through Fred Yates's games.
Right.
But Holmes played rook d1 takes d5.
In his head. He's saying, look, I've got my development's complete, and I got my two bishops. I'm set up for an attack. And this knight to d5 looks kind of weak. What I'm going to do is take it. Now I'm going to sacrifice. I'm going to get a piece and a pawn from my rook, but I'm going to be on the attack. And there's one thing that I notice right away to keep in mind. Notice that there's now a back rank weakness for white. So one of the things that a lot of combinations end with, like, I can't play what I intended to play because I'm going to get mated on the back rank. So it's just something to keep in mind. It's a weakness now that wasn't there when the rook was on d1. Now that the rook's off of it, it's a possibility that the back rank weakness might be a factor later on.
Yeah.
So
it's important to notice this, right? Even when you're considering rook takes d5, because I think we've all, played games of chess where we get carried away with our attack and leave our back rank vulnerable, and one move wrecks all the fun.
Oh gosh, 40 good ones can be wrecked by one.
Yep. Ex d5.
Okay. Can't take with the bishop. So.
And then rook takes d5, bugging that queen again.
And why not? It's toggling between, assuming he's going to go to c6.
He, I think, got a little tired of that.
Oh?
And so he goes queen e7.
Okay. Giving up the pin on the bishop.
Yep.
Which is what I was trying to maintain.
And then Harry Holmes plays knight to g5.
With a not so subtle threat.
Yep, not so subtle. Queen takes h7, check. King f8 and queen h8, mate. Not so subtle at all. So Yates sees it, of course, and plays knight to f8 to defend h7.
A good defensive resource to pay attention to, because the knight on f8 in a castle can be an excellent defender. This is also active, it's towards the center and stuff like that. When you're trying the rest of your pieces and you just want a knight to hold down the fort, the f8 square, this is one reason. It was a very subtle point, but it shows up in a lot of games in the Queen's Gambit declined. The rook belonged on e8, and partly because it opens up the f8 square for the knight to retreat to. The problem with f6 is it can be attacked and driven away, and so then the protection on h7 goes away with it. So the knight on f8 is much harder to attack, but it can be attacked. So, it's something to calculate, but it's seen in many games, a knight on f8 or f1, if it's white we're talking about, protecting the castle king position. Be a very good defender and free the rest of the
I'm
pieces.
going to give, we're getting some guesses here. And I'm going to let, that this is, I enjoy the amount of enthusiasm I'm seeing in the chat.
Cool.
Some people are suggesting knight f7. Others are suggesting rook e5. A lot of different attacking possibilities for white right now.
Absolutely.
Megan,
I don't see how white
you're
could lose
muting?
this game.
He's at 11:30.
Oh, okay. But
White's got to be so happy right now.
Holmes comes up with a very clever move that has not been mentioned yet. So, not knight takes f7 and not rook e5, but bishop d6.
That's a worry, isn't it?
Yeah, because on the other side, see, he's skewering the queen to the knight, and we know the knight is an all-important defender of h7.
It could be attacked on f6, and it's rarely as easy to attack on f8. But here's an example of where it's getting it. Holy smokes!
It's a really, really good move. I really enjoy that skewer. So the queen, again, is under threat and needs to find a safe square and an active square and goes to f6.
Oh gosh. I think queen e6, I think it should have gone to c6.
Yeah.
But I don't see how this looks really bad.
It does. Well, I think most of us would be guessing bishop takes f8 right now, because it removes the defender. You're removing the guard, and then you're threatening big-time stuff on h7, and that is exactly what Holmes does. Harry Holmes plays bishop takes f8. Yeah. And black,
like any of my options.
yeah, does not have very good options here, right? You wouldn't want to take with the rook, because then you would get checkmated. If rook takes bishop, checkmate. You wouldn't want to take with the king, because then the knight could go to h7 and fork your king and queen. It's really pretty. Black plays h6.
Yeah, the only move that I could find. Again, at this position, now white is sacrificed a little bit of material, but you notice that the bishop we talked about as the bad bishop has not moved at all. Has not moved at all. All of white's pieces have moved, and so this advantage in acting, to my way of thinking, than the small amount of material that white has sacrificed.
Master Elvin, let's take a look at that. I'm going to go back one move. Master Elvin suggested, well, what about queen takes g5 instead of pawn h6?
Oh, well, there's a problem with queen takes the rook on d5.
Yeah. So you would be sacking your queen. But I want to make sure that, we like questions. It's good. h6 is threatening the knight on g5. And I'm thinking that Yeats figured that knight was going to skedaddle away. But Harry Holmes plays another really nice move here. Bishop e7.
That capturing on e7 would take away the king's luft or escape. The king needs air. E7, whatever, however you capture it, away the e7 square from the king, so the king cannot run away. So we have a mate threat immediately if you capture that bishop. So you can't capture it. So if you can't capture it, what's your only other choice?
Queen g6.
But now I'm getting hammered. Okay. Ooh, I don't like this at all.
Yeah. And then white plays Queen takes G6.
And notice the reason behind why would you take your queens off? You're attacking, exposing the king. The bishop on c4, which hasn't moved in a long, long time, is now, if the rook on d5 moves, holy smokes.
So pawn takes the queen, fx g6. And now the discovered check is on the table. And it is on the board as well. Rook d8 is what white plays.
Oh my goodness, mate.
It's a beautiful, beautiful move. And Yates is a survivor. He plays bishop e6, finally unifying his rooks.
The only way to save all.
Yep. Then bishop takes e6 check.
Okay.
King goes to h8, forced. And then rook takes a8.
Okay.
Rook takes a8.
All right. Let's do a little material assessment here. We have 5 pawns for black. Their pawn structure is not ideal. We have 6 pawns for white. Their pawn structure is relatively ideal. And let's see, we have 3 pieces for a rook. So it looks like white has a material advantage that really can't be questioned. But there is the h6 pawn attacking the knight. And does that matter? What happens next?
Knight f7 check.
Knight check saves the knight.
Yeah.
Saves a. And we've got 3 pieces for a rook. Better pawns, more of them. This is resignable to me.
And this is exactly where Fred Yates resigns.
Okay.
This game won the Brilliancy Prize in the British Championship. A Brilliancy Prize is awarded to, as you might guess by its name, the game that is chosen as the most brilliant. And this game won that award. And again, Harry Holmes, I don't know much about him, but he was playing Yates, who I've learned to appreciate his games a lot. And Yates won this tournament many times and gets beaten here by Harry Holmes. And this is kind of the story of Yates's chess career, by the way.
Well, this is 1909,
Yeah.
right? Yates starts to win later on, doesn't he? I remember him in the later than the 1909. He doesn't really make a reputation until a few years later, I think.
Yeah, Yates really. This is early in his chess career.
Right.
And Yates wins this championship many times over.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, though, for Yates, he didn't win so many other top tournaments other than the British Chess Championship, is what I've learned. And so he would oftentimes go to some big tournaments. You'll see his name here and there. He would travel to the big tournaments. He would beat, again, the big 3. Lasker, Alyakin, or Capablanca. And then he would lose to a Harry Holmes. And so he was a little bit on the inconsistent side. But brilliant and worthy. You know, I enjoy looking at chess games and searching through databases for little treasures more than I actually enjoy, you know, just playing kind of meaningless speed chess games late at night or something. I enjoy looking for little treasures, and this game was a really nice little treasure. And again, this was a complete surprise for Jim. He had no idea
Yeah,
what I had chosen for him, and
and Chris, I gotta tell you, because it was Yates that you were showing me games from, I kind of assumed Black was going to win, but I couldn't figure it out. I was like, White's got the better game. White's getting better. White's looking good.
yeah.
I'd sacrifice the night. The exchange, and it's like, White just looked better most of the game, and I think Black went wrong a couple of times, just modestly, but he never completed his development,
Hmm.
and that's the key. And when White had the superior development, it was worth a little bit of material sacrifice to capitalize on that. And White took advantage of it at just the right time. Retreating bishop to g3 was an option there, and many players would have chosen it. But rook takes on d5 was the shot that turned the game around. Black was helpless after that. And so you got to strike at the right moment in chess. And often your chances will come around only once. Sometimes, if you're lucky, more than once. But sometimes you need to be able to play the move that allows you to win the game, and not was. I'm only talking about myself, chickening out. Sometimes you have to go that extra yard and say, okay, I sense that I am set up to win this game, and it's going to require tactic, and it's going to require sacrifice, and I've got to have the guts to play the sacrifice in order to convert the point. And so I don't know anything about Holmes, but my tip of the hat to him for taking advantage of the moment. And I also really like what you said about searching for gems, because this is a game I've never seen, and I really appreciate you showing it to me, Chris.
Hmm. I really, it's I like to go through and it kind of as soon as I find a hidden gem, then I'm ready to go off to dreamland. It's kind of
Yeah,
my nightly routine. And chess is such a historic game, and there's so many games that
yeah.
it's not too hard to find hidden gems. It's really not. And a lot of people limit themselves to just looking at world championship games, and those are always great to look at and very educational. Um,
Or only modern games. That's another pitfall
yeah,
that people.
but on any given day, any of us, could be a Harry Holmes. We could, and this was not by accident. You cannot play as good as Harry Holmes by accident here.
Right.
He outplayed Yates in this game, um, and so it's inspiring, and it's fun to discover. And my next research that I'm going to be doing, you might guess it, I'm going to be looking at other Harry Holmes games to see how often he would duplicate this level of brilliance. I haven't gotten to that point yet. I just discovered this game last night. Uh,
Well, I admire you for even looking up Yates and getting a book about him,
yeah.
because of all the players of that time, he's not one that would stand out in my mind as somebody that I would study. But as you point out, he won the British Championship 6 times or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. So and what you pointed out was, I think, bears repeating, was, he was the kind of guy that can knock off the top players, but would also lose to some of the bottom players. And so his international results, he would come in third or fourth, and so you didn't notice him at the top winning tournaments. And so his reputation would suffer for people like myself, who was looking, well, he didn't win, he finished fourth. But if you go beyond, as you do, Chris, and study the games, then you're going to find something that's shocking, surprising, a beautiful game. And so it's so easy for for players like myself. When I was studying, Lekian's games, Capablanca's games, Lasker's games, I was definitely looking at World Championship, with the exception of Nimzovich, because I was reading my system. But that's a trap you can fall into. There's so many great players that have not gotten to the very top of the game, And in Yates's case, it's often attributed to his physical health. He had some breathing trauma. I don't know if he had tuberculosis or something like that, but I do know that he had some health issues. And so it's stamina in a tournament too. Sometimes you can produce a beautiful game, but by the end of a tournament, you're fatigued and
Mm-hmm.
you're just that well. And so it could be, and we know this from players like Rubenstein, who showed so much brilliance, and then later in his career, he wasn't the same player.
Mm-hmm.
And there are things like that. Many, and Bobby Fischer's another example. He was at his peak, and he never played again. So these are the types of things that do happen, and we should keep an open mind whenever we look at players of the past and not judge them too harshly by their results.
Absolutely. These are human beings. These are real people like Jim, myself, or you guys, and they have other things going on in their lives. I know Jim and
Yeah,
I have looked at a Rubenstein game in the past. We've looked at a Rudolph Spielman game in the past, and
yes,
Spielman was incredible, but he, um, had a much rougher go of the wartime than say Capablanca. Capablanca
right.
became a world champion and was hanging out in Hollywood. Um, and Spielman, not nearly as fortunate, but Spielman actually had a plus record against Capablanca. Um, so that there are a
And
lot of factors that
yeah, Pillsbury was health was another
Pillsbury, yeah, yeah.
factor there, and you had other players that had good health, good long lives, and they're in more record books.
Hmm.
They played in more tournaments, and some of them had a meteoric rise to the top. And then Paul Morphy is the greatest example of all, the pride and sorrow of chess. There was shot to the top of the world and then stopped playing.
Yep, yep. Jim, before I let these guys go back to their camp assignments, and remember, the camp tournament starts at noon, so get there, at least 5 minutes early, and make sure you join the tournament. You need to hit the join button. So if you're in the middle of an assignment, you can pause your assignment and come back to it, but make sure you join the tournament. It's fun. Um, but before we head off to do that, Jim, I mentioned the Eade Foundation earlier in the broadcast. I want to give you a opportunity to do the same right now.
Well, thank you very much for that, Chris. Yeah, the Eve Foundation I was started shortly after the death of my father, and he taught me the game of chess. It's one of the ways I'm paying him back. I give an Arthur Award every year to the best chess essay, and so go to evefoundation.org to the website, and you'll see how to um, submit the essay for that. You'll see past winners. And also, we try to support both chess excellence and chess literacy. So we start programs in places where they don't have the resources to start programs for themselves. And you'll notice that we have programs in South America and Africa, Lebanon, Bhutan, and Asia. Anywhere, it doesn't matter what country you're from. It doesn't matter what language you speak. If you play chess, you're part of the chess community. Help you get started. And so thanks a lot for the opportunity to talk about the foundation. It's very dear and near to my heart. Thank you, Chris.
Awesome, and thank you, Jim. We will do this again
Okay,
in the
bye.
future for sure. Bye. All right, camp players, off to your assignments and enjoy enjoy the rest of your day at the free online summer chess camp. Bye.